So you're almost there. You're 30 minutes to lunch. I think we'll be able to get there, pick up the time. The last presentation this morning is mine on trying to make this slightly more complicated. Everybody happy about that? So you've heard a lot about analytics this morning, and our company spends most of our time not from the community standpoint. We do about a third of our work from the community standpoint. We do about 2/3 of our work from the business standpoint. And so what we've learned over time is some of the trends that are out there that we think are true for all of us, both communities and business. And so over lunch, we're going to ask you to talk about the future. And after lunch, we have an open forum to think about that. So we want to talk a little bit about sort of trends that are either making it harder in small communities or also making it easier in small communities to react. So you got to put on your Jetsons hat to start, and a lot less graphs, a lot more pictures than this one, so enjoy the pictures for a while. I want your Jetsons hat on, and I don't want you to be thinking about what's new, but I want you to be thinking about what's next. That's the difference. It makes you a futurist this morning. Instead of trying to catch up with what's new, I want you to think about what's next, and then what does that mean to me and my organization and my community and really my challenge. For many of you, it's how do you get to your challenge? And we could do lots of trends. Some of them you are baked in, you already know, you've got it down. You know that we're urbanizing, 100-year trend in America. That's both cities and their suburbs. So when we think of metropolitan areas, we think of them as the same because annexation rules are so different around the country. And you know, in Virginia, Danville's not in a county, and in some counties are 100 miles wide. And you know, in some places like St. Louis, there's 75 cities in the metro. You know, so we don't think about it. We think about urban areas. We know we're getting more diverse. Baked in, going to happen for a long time. Hopefully, we're continuing to live longer. I know I'm counting on it. So longevity is part of it. And we think tech is marching forward. But I want to hit 10 really quick things for you to think about during lunch and as you go forward that are trends. And the first one's acceleration. You've heard a couple people mention it along the way. So this is sort of raise your hand part of the group. How many of you think that the pace of change has accelerated over the last 10 to 20 years? Raise your hand. All right. So this is how you become a futurist. You ask people, and then if they all agree, you say, that's it, that's a trend, it's perfect. Anybody here think that it's going to slow down? Anybody? So the question becomes, what does that mean? I mean, how fast do you have to start reacting? And, you know, what happened in 1999 matter anymore? Does what happened in 2005 matter anymore? I mean, what's going to happen going forward? And sort of put yourself in the mind that 20 years ago, and many of you, we talked yesterday about all these projects that started 20 years ago. All the people in Durham, by the way, that were talking yesterday, the master plan for downtown Durham was 20 years ago this year. I happen to know because I helped write it. 20 years ago, if you were the coolest person in your community with the highest tech, this is what you looked like. You had yourself a CD player with a Walkman headphones. You had yourself, if you're real cool, a Betamax or VHS. You had yourself a fax machine and a pager. How many people in the room have had a pager in their lives? How many of you have a pager? That was what was cool 20 years ago. Today, y'all got your smartphones, the coolest new apps. You go home at night, you talk to your Alexa. If you're really cool, you whisper to your Alexa and she whispers back to you. You got your doorbell, you've checked it while you're here to see if Amazon brought you a package, you've reset your temperature, you're wearing your Fitbit, and if you're real cool this Christmas, you buy yourself one of these things where you can sit here, talk to your dog does what it's supposed to do, whether that's roll over, play dead, or do whatever, and you press a button and the dog gets a treat from here. So everybody go out and buy that, it's not that expensive. That's sort of the cool going forward. But all the stuff that all the people talked about this morning, we all know that it's not just wearables for our fun tech. I've been in manufacturing plants a lot the last 6 months. Everybody walking through the building has wearables on. They're doing wearables as they go through their companies. You know that 5G is going to change how we do this. 37% of companies say they have already started implementing or planning the implementation of AI. And then 4.0 is now everywhere in manufacturing. That's what's really changing, and that acceleration's moving forward. Second trend. The fact that we're all hyper-connected, but also what does that do to data and information? So there's 4 billion of us on the internet. There's 2 billion of us talking to our Alexa at night. Since I started talking 30 seconds ago or whatever it was, there's been 25,000 new websites. So information's expanding so fast that it's creating these holes. So there's tons of information, but we all know something about something, hopefully, but we don't know much about much. How many Fortnite players in the room? Raise your hand if you're a Fortnite player. There are 200 million of them. They made $2 billion last year. It puts them in the top echelon of business, and none of us even paying attention to it. If you start figuring out, in these conversations like we're in, we'll have equity discussions. If I'm somewhere else in the country, we're not having equity discussions. Some communities are having discussions on housing, other communities aren't. I mean, we get in our hole and we dig deep and we learn a lot and we're passionate about it, but we make the assumption that everybody else knows something about it, and it's not really true. You've heard a ton of data analytics, and we'd argue in our company that data analytics might be running the world right now, already. We just don't know it quite yet, that it's running the world. We do a multi-factor analysis, 200 factors on 100 metros, not on 933 metros and micros, but on 100 metros for clients. And it's everything. It's business climate and workforce and innovation and demographics and economy. We don't make up what the 100 factors are, the 200 factors. We ask the client, what do you care about? As a business, what's most important to you? How do you weight this? Is it more important to you that people are moving into that community, or is it more important for you that they have tax breaks? Or is it more important to you that they have broadband? Or is it more important to you whatever? And then they weight it and we run it for communities. This last one we did, Raleigh turned out number 1, Austin, Seattle, Dallas. By the way, those are the places that are growing fast. By the way, Fayetteville, Arkansas is home to, that metro is home to Walmart, J.B. Hunt, Tyson, Simmons, I think it's 5 Fortune 100s. And on our data, shows now top 20 growth city in America, metro in America. So that's why Fayetteville pops up when you're doing this. So people are doing data analytics, but here's the problem. Can we do a talent attraction one? Sarah did this for this group last year. We're about to update it on ability to attract labor both in metros and micros. So here's what makes your head explode. Hey Alexa, what's the best community to live in? She doesn't know yet, but she knows the best 5 restaurants she'll tell you to go to. And you go to them. And when she gets to what's the best 5 cities to move my company to, so right now, McKinsey or some site selector or our firm or others is Alexa. We're asked, what's the best place? And we run data analytics and give someone an answer. Is that fair? No. But they don't want the detail. They want to know how the data sorts out. When you ask her, what's the best, how many of you you travel, you're always using your restaurant guides, your Yelps, your whatever. Show me the best restaurants in the community. Here's the 5 top restaurants. I go to the 5. I don't go to 27 number, I go to 5. And so data analytics already is working against smaller communities. Third, constant disruption. So, anybody here had a brick in 1983? Did you really? Yeah. All right. Let me tell you what Carl's brick was like. So most of us are too young for that, but it was $10,000. It was 2 pounds. Oops, sorry. Excuse me. Carla, will you go back for me? No. One more. It took 10 hours to charge it, and it lasted 20 minutes. 1983, and nobody bought them, except Carl, because he worked for the federal government at the time.
I was issued one.
You issued one at the federal government. He had one at the federal government. The rest of us were like, well, yeah, that's crazy. But 3 years later, this bad boy came out. Bag phone. Now watch the room. How many people had a bag phone? Look at the room. 3 years, disruption completely. From 3 years earlier, first time you have a brick and it shows up on TV and everybody thinks, wow, that's cool, but who can afford $10,000 other than high-ranking federal officials? 3 years later, you end up with a bag phone, and it changes our world. So today what's happening is the disruption of products, of companies, of sectors, of industries over and over. So this is Harley Davidson and Budweiser and Victoria's Secret and Tiffany's. Stocks I used to own. All companies that are in danger of going out of business now. And if you're Southern like us, the ones that really scare you is Campbell's Soup and Jell-O, because we won't have anything to do at a Sunday dinner. I mean, if we go to a potluck and we don't have cream of mushroom soup, we're toast, right? But people are saying no more, young people don't eat Campbell's Soup. So Campbell's Soup is in trouble. So you're looking at things that were always here that are now in trouble with disruption. Whole sectors. What has Airbnb done? What has Spotify done? What has Lyft done? What has Amazon done to everybody? Whole sectors disappearing and changing rapidly. So if you're in a community, you're fighting. Jobs. We remember fondly travel agents and data entry clerks and reporters and disc jockeys, and pretty soon, surgeons. Da Vinci's doing a pretty good job with its heart surgery. So the disruption is happening every moment, and if you're in a community, you have to anticipate where the disruption goes forward, deal with it. Lots of places, heard about vulnerability to automation. The South, big numbers because it's based on occupational data. Scattered places, not so much. Virginia is one of those places, not so much. But we know, and this will go down to the metro level and the micro level based on the occupational projections. Fourth, rising complexity. If you don't believe the world's getting more and more complex, think about everything you've heard for the last 2 days. I mean, it'll make your head hurt, right? So here's the trend off of that. We have now got to the point where it is too complex for us to know ourselves. We're dependent on each other. We're dependent on the people who are doing this for us. And as we get to this sort of collective intelligence model, collective intelligence goes back 300 years, and 100 years ago, H.G. Wells wrote a book on the fact that we're all interdependent on each other to know stuff. Well, the key to that is always keep your eyes forward, build networks of trust. Think about this. If you have to depend on somebody else, you have to trust them. Well, how do we learn to trust each other? We learn through interaction. So if you're in a community, someone asked this morning, who's doing this in a community? It's a group of people who've gotten to know each other, trust each other, and do it collectively. I agree completely with that answer that it's never a person, because nobody's got enough bandwidth to know as much of this. We always tell communities that the challenge for leaders is to gather and filter information, simplify complexity, convert knowledge into action, and do it quicker. And then everybody in the room goes, oh, okay, I think I'm gonna quit this board because that's hard. Fifth, and I'm not gonna spend much time on this, but we do it a lot, the data suggests to us that there are more winners and more losers, that there's a widening gap between places and between people. So you've heard that from an equity standpoint, but we talk a lot about national economy, 1.4% job growth last 12 months. Well, if you look, that's 50 states. Look at the difference in the chart. There are states growing at 3.5%, and there are states growing at 0.5%. And if you're sitting in a 3.5% state, you feel entirely different about the world than if you're in a 0.5% state. And we could do this. The more data you could do, you could filter this all the way down. This is manufacturing job growth over the last 10 years. You can see states that have grown. You've seen states that are in the bottom half, all different. Everybody thinks tech jobs are growing, but when we do tech reports, there's a whole group of people down here at the bottom that are actually losing tech jobs. 87 NAICS codes, right, Sarah? 87 specific NAICS codes to define technology. There are people at the top who are gaining a lot, people who are not gaining. And if you dial that down to the metro level or the county level or the person level, these things start to widen. Population even changes. I was in Florida doing a future forum a few weeks ago. Did you know that West Virginia and Florida had the same population in 1950? 1.9 million. Florida now has 22 million. West Virginia has 1.8 million. That's a long time. Most of us weren't alive in 1950, but the world has changed. Sixth, the talent wars are out there. I find most economic developers spend most of their life today on workforce, not on incentives. They're out there trying to figure out how to find workers for people. And the talent war is going to get more acute because we're at record low unemployments, and we can have long discussions about participation rates and whatever. We're at almost record low growth in our labor force, and millennials just aren't having children. And there's a bunch of reasons, and we can have family-friendly discussions for the rest of the week. Toyotas and t-shirts cost less, but child care and health care and college cost more. And so a whole bunch of us don't have grandchildren except the ones that look like this. That's Reese. He's 7 years old. He's 120 pounds. I love him to death. Even happy to contribute to his knee surgery, but he's not going to help you in your workforce 20 years from now, guaranteed. This is a famous set of maps that was created by the University of Virginia that looks at the population change over a 10-year period for every county in America, same kind of orange-blue that you've been seeing all day. And you can see a lot of places were shrinking, but when you looked at working age population, a whole bunch of the country shrunk. The number one issue for companies overall is can I get enough workers with the right skills? And if you put up this map, and it shows that the number of workers is shrinking in most of the country, and you want to know why Raleigh and upstate South Carolina and Charlotte and Orlando and Nashville, they're the blue areas. If you're a company, it's self-fulfilling. That's where people are moving, that's where I'm moving. Their people will move there. Seventh, national discussion on education and skills, and I think we're rethinking it. We're having a debate, and sometimes politicized, about should you get a 4-year degree, should you get a 2-year degree, maybe you should go get your electrician's license. We've gotten past everybody ought to go to 4-year schools. And if you're still in a part of the country that's that, you're probably in a university town that says everybody ought to go get a 4-year degree. Not there. About a quarter of the jobs need a 4-year degree. Sorry. Rest of the country's figured out that it's about finding a skill that works for you, that allows you to make a living, support your family. And so we get asked all the time, what are the top skills? We've done workforce reports. We think there are 4 skills employers tell us over and over. Personal skills, which have to do with responsibility and showing up at work and all that stuff. People skills, communication, teamwork, empathy, all of that. Thinking skills. Can you learn? Can you be creative? Can you relearn? And then some technical skills. And we'd love everybody to have a specific technical skill that's in demand. We get at which one of these is most important. Doesn't matter. If you're really smart and you work well with people but you don't show up, don't want you. If you show up and you're really good with people but you can't think and you can't adapt, don't want you. I mean, it's all 4 of those skills put together. 8th, you heard a lot about. We're the frog in the pot on housing. Till 18 months ago, we didn't do a single economic development plan that included a housing component. We have not done one without a housing component in the last 18 months. All of a sudden, housing that used to be a San Francisco problem is a national problem. Everywhere you go, affordability of housing is not affordable housing. There's a difference. And everybody's now in affordability of housing mode. Every economic developer, because you can't attract people unless you have the housing stock. 9th is we have for 20 years operated under a world geography that said trade expands and expands more and more, and low wage jobs they chase lower cost overseas. Today, with what's happening around the world, that's all changed. And what used to be trade was growing at about twice the global GDP. It's now growing just over 1 times the global GDP. It's just barely a positive anymore. We're seeing people's supply chain shorten. We're seeing people talk about reshoring, but what we're talking about is certainty. And overseas has become a lot less certain. In the next couple years, the 2 charts we like, in May, we were doing, this is the economist projections of GDP growth for the 15 largest economies in the world. They are 3/4 of the global economy. everybody was projecting 2.5. 3. Since then, everybody's been downgraded except us. So globally, Germany, Brazil, South Korea, Australia, Mexico, all GDP numbers down. And we're starting to feel that locally. And you know, manufacturing growth has slowed pretty significantly in the US over the last, 18 months or so. And I was with the Virginia manufacturers yesterday, and what they're saying is, oh, we feel it. We understand trade policy, we understand slowing growth, we feel it. I asked the room yesterday, how many of you thought there'd be a recession in the next 18 months? About 90%, at least a manufacturing recession. And last, my favorite John Wayne quote is, life's really hard, it's harder if you're stupid. You know this inherently because it's what you do for a living, but in these times of rapid change, serendipity is not really a strategy. There are not many metropolitans that I know of that think if they just sit tight, things will get a lot better. You have to be intentional about what you do. You heard a lot yesterday about people with long-range plans and whatever. We actually believe that successful collaborative leadership at the local level is the place-based differentiator. And we've been asked a couple times, how do you measure that? And the answer is, I don't know. You send sociology teams out in the winter to go talk to local leadership and see what's working. I'd bet you money right now that when you go out and talk to some of these outliers, they're going to talk about a leader or a group of leaders or a community foundation or something that doesn't show up in the data that just made them different and allowed them to be a little stronger than their neighbors. And you all know this. I mean, you've been around communities. Some communities seem to get it, whatever it is. Some communities seem to be able to act. It usually is because they figured out how to work together and get things done. I think that's true of almost all the successful communities. There are very few, Lone Ranger generals that run around saying, I'm going to transform my community, follow me, and everybody just goes, oh yeah, sure, whatever you want. It doesn't work that way. So as we move forward with these trends, our lives get harder because some of the things seem to run against us. But in smaller communities, you're more nimble. You know everybody. I mean, think about trying to get collaborative leadership in Austin, Texas today. How many people are in the room? But if you go talk to, if you go to Danville, Clark, and you say, who are the 15 or 20 people we need to make sure are in the room, you know them. Most of them have been in the room for a long time, and they're part of it. If you think about being able to respond to quick change, smaller is better. It's easier to turn that little boat than that big boat. So you have advantages in a disruptive economy that you might not have. Now, winners and losers, the data stuff hurts because you're not on the list. You just don't end up on the list. So how do you get on list? And one of the ways is what we're doing here. If you can have data that shows strengths and weaknesses for a broader area. We asked last night at the cocktail area, who's doing pretty well? And several of you were talking about places in Nebraska or places in Idaho. I have no idea. We have to have more of that information out there. So the more information that includes micropolitans and smaller communities, the more likely we are for that information to permeate decision making. Because it's not any harder for us to have information on 100 communities or 500 communities. And we can run the sorts. Again, it'll be about what people want and what they can have, but different people need different things. And we've heard lately from 4 or 5 places, when we're talking to millennials and we do YP focus groups, they say, I want to be in a place I can make a difference. And y'all have heard this, and I try really hard not to throw millennials in some big group and typecast them because it's not fair, and we know that. But what I hear is I want to make a difference, and I can't make a difference in this big place. I just get swallowed up. But if I go one area out, still got to be near an airport, still need a brew pub. The good news is everybody's got a brewery now, that I can make a difference. I think there is a reversibility with housing affordability and with other things for millennials to choose more places. Not every place, there'll still be winners and losers, but more places and more smaller places. And we're seeing some of that, and I think some of the data will show that there are some winners out there, that you don't just have to be big to win. You have to be special. You have to do some of the things people have talked about for the last 2 days. But I think there are advantages. What I don't think is that we're going to change any of these trends. I don't think things are going to slow down. Don't think things are going to get less complicated. I don't think data is going to become less usable. I think talent's still going to rule. I think housing's still going to be an issue. I think global connectivity is going to be in flux. Anybody disagree with any of that? So the last thing becomes the thing, is how do we build that connectivity in our communities? And so what I want you to do, lunch is ready, right? So what I want you to do over lunch, first go get some food, because you've been sitting here all morning and you've been very polite. Go get some food, and at your tables, I want you to think about how all the information you heard this morning fits in to questions you still have and things you still want to know about. And after lunch today, we have an open forum. That's what we do after lunch at Home of Future Thinking. For about an hour, we're just going to take any question you have on any subject, and we're going to try to collectively try to answer that in the room. So I'm into free for all. So go get lunch whenever you want, and come back here, and in about 45 minutes, 1:15, we'll start a conversation.